All right.
Hello, all truth warriors. Today's guest should need no introduction, as his tireless efforts to combat a corrupt medical system has seen him spreading the truth on many important subjects. He heads up an incredible alliance of leading experts, and the wealth of knowledge is shared between all, changing the world one day at a time. It's a pleasure to see his return back to the Atlantic Underground. Dr. Peter McCullough, hello, sir, and how are you doing?
Chris, great to be with you. Great to go underground where it's safe and we can actually start to talk about these important issues. Boy, so many news items to cover, so many developments.
Now, Peter, I do have to say, I mean, you could be retired, but instead, I receive probably 4 to 6 emails in depth with so much information from you every day. Yesterday, I spoke to you on the phone. You're in a hotel, you're traveling, you're at speaking events, you're doing podcasts and interviews. I've got to ask you one thing, Peter. What drives you to do this?
Before the pandemic, I was a very active academic doctor, internal medicine, cardiology. I was a pioneer on the connections between heart disease and kidney disease. I worked in vitro diagnostics, large pharmaceutical randomized trials, clinical strategies, devices, and my plate was full. But I have to tell you, with the pandemic and how so many people were harmed, sadly injured, some disabled, and of course people lost their lives both due to the infection of the vaccine. My work as a doctor, an academic physician, has risen to a far more important level now. I'm actually entering the most important phase of my career. Now I'm at near the end of it, but I can tell you it is the capstone, no doubt about it. I was ready for this from the beginning. And from the very beginning, I've been very careful in my analyses. We're talking beginning of 2020, and I haven't been wrong. I have not advised the public in a single instance in the wrong direction.
Absolutely. Now, with the inauguration drawing ever closer and Robert F. Kennedy Jr. heading up the health sector, do you think we're in for a promising future, or are these just empty promises?
It's going to be mixed. Clearly, Trump getting the electoral vote, the popular vote. He has a strong mandate. He faltered a little bit on some of the selections for Senate, approval, confirmation. But it looks like they're going to come through. Pam Biondi looked like she did well. RFK looks like there's enough votes for him, and Pete Hegseth for the Department of Defense. So these are gonna probably go through. The issues will be, particularly with Robert F. Kennedy, will be, I think, one of them will be an internal issue within him. This is very important, Chris. Robert F. Kennedy was a candidate for president of the United States.
Yeah.
He gave up his candidacy and he joined Trump. Trump has a 4-year term, and that's it. There's no re-election of Trump after this. This is it. He's got 4 years, and 4 years is a short period of time. If Robert F. Kennedy, in his mind, thinks that he's going to be Secretary of Health and Human Services for 4 years, and then he himself is going to run for president, then we're in a totally different scenario. So the minute someone runs for president, they begin to drop personal stakes in issues. They have a major focus on appealing to popularity. They have a major focus on election politics, voting blocks, etc. So I think it's very important. If RFK gets in there and says, listen, I've got 4 years and that's it, I'm going to do everything I can to improve the health of Americans, that's one thing. But if he says, I want to be president in 4 years, different story. So I predict that he'll want to be president. In 4 years. I will predict that we're going to see a blended approach. I think Susie Wiles the chief of staff is going to be a moderating force. We'll see some low-hanging fruit, which is already happening, like trying to, make some moves and improving the health of the food supply. Yeah. But the big ticket things people are looking for are, pulling the COVID vaccines off the market, banning all forms of vaccine mandates for, the childhood schedule, banning the mandates for that to attend school, work, or the military, rescinding the 1986 Vaccine Injury Compensation Act, removing direct-to-consumer advertising for pharmaceuticals. People want those big four. I think we should put those up on the board, Chris, and let's see if Kennedy and his team go after them.
Yeah, definitely. Now, most people see this pandemic that we've been through for what it is now. And the likes of monkeypox was absolutely laughed away. But now they're pushing the bird flu. How far do you think they'll go with this? And are the public wise enough now just to laugh at this and say, no, not again?
There seems to be a strategy now. In my book, Courage to Face COVID-19, we define this biopharmaceutical complex, this syndicate of non-governmental agencies like the WHO, World Economic Forum, Gates Foundation, and others, the regulatory agencies, and the pharmaceutical companies, the suppliers in the complex. But the strategy is float out an infectious disease threat in a news story or, from some sources of data, some outbreak somewhere. See if it latches on in terms of driving fear, announcements for public health emergencies of concern, for instance, and then be at the ready with a vaccine. Remember, a vaccine is the answer. So we've seen this with monkeypox, and it was a war of information. And, unlike COVID-19, where experts like myself, we were late in, getting in front of the camera on TV, on national primetime TV. I was about 9 to 12 months late. Monkeypox, I was there day one, and not just me, but other reasonable doctors who said, wait a minute, this is not an emergency. It's a sexually transmitted disease. It doesn't spread very readily, and we've got a treatment for it. And monkeypox essentially died. Yeah. Bird flu, we've been at this at the very beginning. This outbreak's been going on for 4 years. Bird flu's been around for over 100 years, different strains. It's a very mild strain. This one looks like it came from gain-of-function serial passage research from the USDA Poultry Research Lab in Athens, Georgia. So this is actually probably a man-made problem that's affecting us right now, and is causing unnecessary slaughter of healthy chickens, and it's very mild for the animals. They should just gain natural immunity. Humans get natural immunity. We have early treatment, nasal sprays and gargles to prevent, and early treatment to handle. So bird flu is not going anywhere, so it just keeps going. Now we've heard about human metapneumovirus in China. Yeah. So each one of these stories is floated out to see, is it going to generate fear? Will people like Chris Smith and Dr. McCullough get out there and propose a reasonable understanding, a reasonable framework of interpreting this infectious disease threat? And as I go around the country and go from city to city, I don't see anybody expressing fear over COVID, over flu, over monkeypox, bird flu, or human metapneumovirus. People are living their lives honestly, Chris, and they want to be left alone.
Which is great. Now, you testified at the US Senate November the 19th, 2020, and told them that 50% of the lives at that time could have been saved. Was your advice taken following this? And what happened with the death tolls moving forward with that?
Well, that was after a good 6 months into the pandemic. I later testified that percentage that, what's called the population attributable fraction that could have been saved is probably 85%. Now, that was with early nasal sprays and gargles, dilute povidone iodine or xylitol, proven later in studies, early nutraceutical supplements, vitamin D, very positive data, aspirin, positive data. And then the prescription drugs, and it really didn't matter. I think the most effective was ivermectin, but hydroxychloroquine had an effect, certainly ivermectin, Paxlovid, molnupiravir. Get into steroids, colchicine, and then the blood thinners. There should have been a treatment profile early And and the Operation Warp Speed drugs could play a role. Certainly, the monoclonal antibodies should have been given to every senior citizen who got sick, every person who visited the ER. Sadly, let's say monoclonal antibodies, which there's no argument they were safe and effective, they were only given to 15% of people who were sick enough to become hospitalized in the United States. Yet we bought doses for every American. And of course, those who got the antibodies survived, those who didn't died. So as we sit here today at 1.2 million Americans who are listed as COVID deaths, based on CDC information, where if we had adjudication, people carefully looked at the cases, about 10% would have died directly due to SARS-CoV-2 infection, 10%. The Italian data suggests it's 3%. So it's a small fraction that really, and other people were at life expectancy, had other problems, etc. Remember how they count it is that someone could have had COVID 3 months earlier and then fallen and died of a hip fracture, and it's counted as a COVID death. So, but believe me, it cannot, 1.2 million cannot all be COVID deaths.
Yeah.
So we're at about 120,000 Americans who died directly of COVID. And yes, 85% could have been spared. Now, McCullough protocol, the most widely used multi-drug protocol, the only one that featured nasal sprays, gargles, all the things that really work, that approach has been used worldwide and has been credited with saving tens of millions of lives and sparing hundreds of millions of hospitalizations. So my work on the early treatment protocol, copyrighted in my name, not for financial reasons, but for accountability reasons. Who else is accountable in treating COVID? There is no Harvard protocol or Mayo protocol or Karolinska protocol. The academic institutions really fell flat during the pandemic. And historians are going to look back and say, where was the bravado?
Yeah, it is. Now, you've been an incredible guest on Joe Rogan. Do you think his platform gets the right message out to the people with the work he does? And could he be doing more?
I was just down in Austin yesterday with Kyle Kingsbury. He's also kind of a disciple of Rogan, knows Joe well. We were just, not too far from Rogan's studio. I think Joe Rogan will go down in history as a very impactful historical figure. It really is extraordinary. Prior to the pandemic, I vaguely knew about him. I didn't listen to his podcasts. When Joe reached out to me in 2020, I told him I'm too busy to interview. he didn't expect that answer. I said, I'm a busy doctor. And finally, we negotiated. I showed up about a month and a half later to his Austin studio. And, I found him to be very well prepared. He asks very intelligent questions, and he always listens, which is very important. And it's listening to learn. He's got that ability. And, when I received it, we received many, many millions of views. Some still claim it's the most widely viewed episode he's ever shot, including that of Elon Musk or Trump recently.
Yeah.
But importantly, the mean age of people who listened to my interview was 24. And it's a 3-hour interview with a transcript. The most common term that we covered in the program was monoclonal antibodies. So we brought people very important information, and boy, he went on from there. He's had so many impactful interviews. I don't know if you saw this most recent one with Mark Zuckerberg. Did you see that?
Yes, I did. Yeah.
Zuckerberg, his hair was grown out. He looked kind of crazed. He looked like a nut. And Zuckerberg just starts rattling it off that the Biden administration was calling him and the Meta platforms, telling them to take down posts. And most of these posts were scientific abstracts, manuscripts, and commentaries on vaccine side effects. So the world was getting a one-sided view, a false view of the vaccines. Yeah. The vaccines were falsely portrayed as safe and effective without side effects. But in fact, they were loaded with side effects, and all of that was suppressed. And so the public response to this, and even Rogan's response, was interesting. Many commented that said, listen, you could have said no. You could have said, no, we're not going to pull things down. We're not going to censor information.
Yeah.
And the other response is people said, well, great. Now, since they're getting rid of fact checkers, and by the way, the Meta platform uses the International Fact Checking Network, IFCN, which is an organized propaganda unit. It's basically a bunch of independent consultants, and they organize, and they're 100% pro-vaccine. This is not an even balanced fact checking. And there's linkages to the Gates Foundation, to the Annenberg Foundation at University of Pennsylvania, and they're all heavily supported by, yes. So he said, well, we're going to go to community notes writers. Now, what's the problem with community notes or IFCN? The problem is who can influence them. And if you're a community notes writer, you can easily be co-opted by the biopharmaceutical complex. And indeed, the vast majority of community notes on Twitter are promoting the vaccine. Just like the vast majority of Health Impact, IFCN, all the fact checkers on social media promote the vaccine. The fact checkers could have a more clever strategy. They could show a little even balance or this and that, but being 100% on one side of an issue, it's obvious that they're not fact checking. It's obvious it's installed censorship, directional censorship, and propaganda. So we'll have to see what happened. Immediately, some of my followers challenged Facebook with a post on vaccine side effects, and it was struck down immediately. So they haven't pulled any censorship out right now. But the fact that he came out and said that, I think was helpful for people to understand that our independent media reporting and shows like yours and mine, that we weren't wrong, we weren't crazy, we were bringing people the truth.
Yeah, no, that's it. And it's, I've been testing the boundaries of since the fact checkers have been removed. And I haven't received the 30-day ban yet, so that's all good.
Oh, no.
Now, I see people like Dr. David Martin putting information out there that should be an absolute wrecking ball to the establishment. What do you think of David Martin's work and the information that he puts out there?
David's contributed greatly on the history of the World Health Organization, which clearly is a jaded and shadowy history. The World Health Organization is a behemoth. It is a massive organization, multi-billion-dollar budget, thousands of employees. And in my book, Courage to Face COVID-19, we believe that the WHO is the nerve center of this biopharmaceutical complex, this syndicate now, which is running the table with, pandemic after pandemic. In a sense, that's what they aspire, and having one response after another, being vaccine after vaccine. I interviewed for my show Lisa Myron, who's an investigative attorney in Toronto.
I had her on yesterday.
and she probably told you, Chris, about national focal points, that these NFPs, there's over 140 of them, and they became the coordinating center for the messaging through the pandemic by the WHO. She's got this nailed down. The NFP for the United States is called PAHO, the Pan American Health Organization in Washington, D.C. So do you remember through the pandemic early on, these phrases that came out all over the world in the media simultaneously all over the world? The world has never been coordinated like this before. And there are montages, Chris, of these coming out where it's said in all the different languages in all the different countries. The first one was, that I can recall, was no one is safe. No, and you can get newsreel after newsreel of everybody on the same day saying no one is safe. And then later on in 2021, crisis of the unvaccinated. And it came out all together, all at once. And these phrases that injected fear into the population, that herded people into mass vaccination, they were carefully coordinated. And Myron thinks the WHO is the nerve center. It makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, definitely. Now, David Martin, he hasn't even been on Joe Rogan's show yet. Would you like to see him on there?
David could. David certainly has done good scholarship on the WHO and some of the patents, but we want to be careful not to overstate things. So yeah, I'll give myself as an example. I coming into the pandemic, I was not paying attention to the PrEP Act. I didn't pay attention to DARPA and their program to develop messenger RNA vaccines in 2012. I wasn't paying attention to the SPARS pandemic exercise in 2017 by the Gates Foundation. I didn't even pay attention or even know about Event 201, which was done in the fall of 2019. Boy, I wish I would have. So I had to catch up, but I can't go back and say, I saw this coming years ago. And I've heard some people say that. They've kind of intonated like, oh, this is predictable. We saw this coming, what have you. So David Martin writes a newsletter that advises investors. So I went ahead and pulled it. You can pull it down. 28, the years up to 2019, including 2019, no mention of a pandemic. Yeah. No mention of coronaviruses. First quarter of 2020, no mention of a pandemic or coronaviruses. So what we have is we have a written record of who said what when.
Yeah.
And you'd be hard pressed to find somebody 10 years ago who put this all together. Myself, Martin, and others, we're piecing it together after the fact. The person I think was quickest in piecing it together, got his book out first, was Peter McCullough. He put it together more quickly. But no one was out there warning us ahead of time. On the vaccines, I'll make the claim. I published an op-ed in The Hill in August of 2020. The Hill it's still on their website today. It's widely read by the House, the Senate, White House, political insiders. So The Hill is solid. It is solid. And, the title of the op-ed was The Great Gamble of the COVID-19 Vaccine Development Program. I'm the only person who called it. Even if Robert F. Kennedy didn't write that.
Yeah.
No one at Children's Health Defense wrote that. Aaron Siri, vaccine attorney, didn't write that. You pick the strongest opposition to vaccines. No one was able to see what I saw with the COVID-19 vaccines. And being the genetic code, that codes for uncontrolled production of spike protein into the human body. Now, for a very long time, the worst biological catastrophe was born out of a terrible idea.
Yeah.
This is a vaccinology idea that is a horribly unsafe, reckless idea.
Yeah. Now, when Donald Trump was talking about treatments, the media spun it to say he was saying people should drink bleach. But I believe the treatment that he was referring to was the likes of CDS, chlorine dioxide solution, or MMS, the miracle mineral supplements. How effective are these? And do you think he was quoted out of context with this?
Yeah, Trump just should have been kept far away from the medical details. During the Spanish flu, Woodrow Wilson never even commented on the Spanish flu during his presidency. You should leave it to doctors. I think if there's another pandemic, I don't even want to see Trump or the President of the United States involved at all, because it's an opportunity for misadventure. It'd be just like me trying to comment on the building trades and making some conclusion regarding steel girders. I would be quickly wrong because I'm not a building expert or an engineer. So what I believe he was talking about, and I learned this from anti-infective dentist Paul Gossett from Chicago, is sodium hypochlorite. Do you know dentists, and this is part of the ADA guidance on what they do, dentists can put a few drops of bleach in water and then swish it in the mouth, and it effectively kills cytomegalovirus and all kinds of viruses that causes gingivitis in the mouth, and then you spit it out. It's very safe. Yeah. So sodium hypochlorite, and where things evolved is on the gargle side. We have xylitol gargles with a spray, scope and Listerine, which use forms of various forms of aromatic alcohols. They're effective. Any type of saline with a peroxide or iodine in it is fine. A little less effective is colloidal silver. That's been studied. But the gargles have to be twice a day. And then the nasal sprays have to be twice a day. It's probably the most important thing your audience can learn. When a virus settles in the nose, let's say you go out to a store today and someone had coughed in the aisle right ahead of you, you don't know. When the virus settles in the nose, it's there for 5 days and you can't feel it. Then it builds up to the point where it starts to cause a little bit of inflammation. And because of the lymphatics track back to the throat, usually the first sign is a sore throat. But when you have a sore throat, the virus has already been in the nose for 5 to 7 days. Yeah. So the key is to always spray something up your nose each day because you want to have flow. You actually want some snot to blow your nose, sniff back, spit out. That can be saline, believe it or not. Saline alone, salt water. You always want to do that twice a day because that will reduce some of the viral load. Now, if you juice up the saline and it has xylitol in it, like the product Clear, grapefruit seed extract, povidone iodine, like Immune Mist from Wellness Company, or Cofix RX, or Betadine, and there's a whole variety. Even there's a recent study in Lancet, the Lancet Respiratory Diseases with Vicks. Vicks First Defense is just a polymer nasal spray. That these sprays, if they're used twice a day, that gives you this kind of 24/7 defense against viruses. Now we're talking. Now there's a prospective randomized double-blind placebo-controlled trial by Baumforth and colleagues, xylitol-based product. It was better than a vaccine, 71% reduction in getting COVID at all. I mean, it literally was defensive. And I've interviewed so many people for my show now. And those who go an entire year with no colds, now people can do it naturally if they're in great shape and not much exposure. But I tell you, I can't. I've gone my entire life with 4 or more colds. And coming out of the pandemic, one time I was sick every month. I can't do it. I cannot go a year without a cold. Only using the nasal sprays and gargles twice a day, and I've done it today already, I'm now 6 months without a cold. I am thrilled. And my wife and I are going for a full year. If we go for a full year, it'll be the first year of our adult lives. We've been married 37 years without having a cold. That's how powerful these nasal sprays and gargles. And so your question was, Trump was on the right track. He should have had someone like me explain it, or Dr. Gus Farrar, who's a brilliant critical care doc, who's one of the key researchers, or Mark O'Connor, but should not have had Trump get up there and try to explain something.
Yeah. I mean, I've been doing well. I can't remember the last time I had a cold myself, but I'm using methylene blue every day and I'm seeing incredible results in energy, clarity of thoughts, no more brain fog. But
Chris, how do you take that? How do you take the methylene blue?
I'm taking it 5 drops in water. I'm using a 2% solution concentrate and I'm putting it into water and I'm drinking it every day. I mean, the benefits are incredible. I mean, I know Mel Gibson, he was on Joe Rogan recently talking about it. I mean, have you looked into methylene blue? Is this something that you use yourself? Or?
It's funny. Well, methylene blue, well, let me ask you, do you drink enough to turn your urine blue?
Yes. Well, green, slightly green by the time it comes out.
well, we use it in a couple applications in medicine. We use it for carbon monoxide poisoning. So we actually give methylene blue intravenously. We also do it to try to revive people after a cardiac transplant when the circulatory system is frozen. It's called cardioplegia.
Yeah. And
it's interesting. My brother got methylene blue. So my brother had a kidney stone and it was stuck and he had a lot of pain. We were going out to dinner that night and he literally fell over out of his chair. He's in so much pain, the kidney stone. So he saw a urologist who said, listen, this is kind of an old-timey remedy to get a kidney stone to pass. So he put in an IV and he gave him a shot of methylene blue, which does relax this tone, the muscular tone, I guess, in the ureter. And he popped out the stone and it peed out, this blue urine. So, methylene blue, and I'll say one more thing about methylene blue. Methylene blue was tested and utilized. I met a doctor in Bahamas. She was an innovator. She was a dermatologist and still is. And methylene blue, given systemically, And then she used a form of light, red light in the mouth to actually kill SARS-CoV-2 and then in the nasopharynx in the mouth. And it was very, and she gave me a demonstration of this. So what we've learned in the pandemic is there are many solutions out there that have not been tested by big pharma. They're widely available. At the Wellness Company, we are offering more and more non-pharmaceutical solutions. Even yesterday, I was with Kyle Kingsbury, who's a friend of Rogan, and he was a former defensive end for USC and an MMA fighter. He says that they exclusively use natural solutions. So there's many people who are just going back to natural approaches. They're not going to take pharmaceuticals.
Yeah, that's it. I mean, everything we use is natural health products. We manufacture our own stuff. We do extracts from plants, and we've been doing this for years now, and it's served us very well. So much so, people are asking us to make it for them. I mean, Lugel's iodine is one of the things we work with, and it appears to be like a powerhouse of potassium for the body. But what exactly is it required for, and what does it do? Is this something that protects the gland system, and why is that important?
I'm not an expert on this, but let me just say something about iodine, which is absolutely necessary for production of thyroid hormone, both the T4 and T3. The only real source of iodine in our diet is salt. It's iodized salt. It's actually intentionally injected with iodine. And, many of us have a low salt diet. We've been told by our doctors, we have high blood pressure, we have a low salt diet. So we tend to be on the low iodine intakes side, maybe even iodine deficient in the population. It's such an issue that with pregnancy now, the guidelines from all the various societies are to actually intentionally take iodine supplements during pregnancy because the baby's thyroid needs to develop. So we have to explore some of these issues because our food supply has become, over time it's become refined and certainly changed. And while it may have things that's undesirable in it, it may be deficient in others. So I'm open to this idea about iodine. Many specialists will say, listen, there is so much hypothyroidism. Population statistics are 8% in men, 15% in women. That made me say, listen, try a little iodine supplement first before we get to the drugs.
Yeah, definitely. And with the salts that you were mentioning as well, I mean, we use sea salt, which is so mineral rich that it gets all the minerals back into the body as well. And people need to obviously realize, don't be using, chemically manufactured table salts and things like that. You really need to go for the high quality mineral stuff.
Well, I'm glad you mentioned that. So you're right. Sea salt has minerals like calcium, magnesium in it. But one of the reasons why we're again deficient in minerals is water. Now, many people in this health freedom space have water filters and they drink bottled water, what have you. Well, they're stripping the minerals out of the water. So I can't tell you how many patients I see have extra beats of the heart called premature atrial contractions, premature ventricular contractions. My most common suggestion initially is take some magnesium chelate, chelated magnesium. For the heart, it's typically magnesium maleate. For the nerves, it's magnesium glycinate. Yeah. And I always ask people, you drink filtered water? Oh yeah, I'm triple filtering it. I'm drinking bottled water. Well, there you go, right? So another hot topic in water, since we're on it, Chris, are you following this story about microplastics?
Yeah, I mean, I've been looking at microplastics for a long time. And again, the salt that we use is filtered through a volcanic sand naturally at the source, at the beaches. And that helps get rid of a lot of the microplastics naturally. But yeah, I mean, this stuff, even going back to BPA, causing problems with estrogen mimickers and things like that in people's body. I mean, I look at this whole LGBTQ movement and wonder whether it's been caused by microplastics and these estrogen mimickers for so long, causing basically hormone disruptions within so many people that it affects the minds.
It doesn't look good. Nick Holscher from the McCullough Foundation, an epidemiologist, a really brilliant young man, has done some great work on microplastics. We were stunned with the New England Journal of Medicine paper where they pulled out carotid atheroma, big cholesterol tubes out of the arteries, and analyzed it, and they're loaded with microplastics. So this stuff is circulating in our body. There's compelling evidence that's the case. The water filters can't filter it.
Yeah.
You can't filter it out completely, and it's coming from various sources. So I had an expert on my show. It came on regarding water, and he said the solution that his company is offering is that, believe it or not, we need to start cleaning the sewer water, the discharge water from businesses sooner. We just can't have it all come through lines to water treatment centers and then start to treat the water. He goes, it's too late. And so he gives great examples. I guess in Europe, they're farther ahead of this than we are, where there's a system that you actually put on the outflow water from a business and you start to clean it. In fact, you can actually recirculate some of the water. So here's an example, is a brewery. So these little microbreweries that are everywhere, they use a tremendous amount of water. He says all of them ought to have a system that you put on, and he showed me some size of these. Some of these are about as big as like the back of a truck, or you ever seen a container, like a container car on a railroad?
Yeah.
So they're pretty big. He said, but if water flows through this system, you can return the water and you can use it to flush toilets. You can use it to water your gardens. You can use it for a variety of reasons. And he says, and when that water is ultimately returned to the common system, it has far fewer microplastics in it. But this issue of microplastics, we're not going to get away with it. There is plastic shedding. I'm glad you mentioned that what gets shed from plastic bottles, but there is shedding through bottles, through straws, plastic cups. So when I have a cup of coffee now, it's ceramic.
Yeah.
I'm just not, and my mom is in a senior home. She was always drinking out of this big plastic cup. And I think she did so because she was afraid if she knocked it over, she would break it. I said, Mom, me and my brother took that away from her and said, Mom, drink out of a glass, no more straw.
Yeah, definitely. Now, is there any chance that the unprecedented push on the safe and effective was for a purpose that many have not yet considered? Could the main goal be mass sterilization of future generations? And sadly, the sudden deaths and the side effects were just the cost of doing business. And the fact that now that if this is the case, that we won't actually see the real intent for this until it's almost out the minds of the masses in years to come.
We can't possibly know, quote, the intent, but it is remarkable how every country is doing the same thing. No country has removed these from the market. No country has issued an inspection of the vials to see what's in the vials. Are they contaminated with what's called cDNA or SV40 fragments or other precipitants? The countries are acting so uniform all over the world. It's remarkable. You can't get the whole world to agree on anything, but yet they are acting in complete unison. Here are the trends. I mentioned my mom in senior living here in Dallas. My mom says they have not offered COVID vaccines for years. For years. This is in a nursing home.
Yeah.
And if the vaccines worked, let's say if they worked and they were safe, they would only be indicated for high-risk, frail senior citizens like my mom. They're not even offering them. But yet children starting at age 6 are getting these shots mandatorily because they're part of the vaccine schedule in the United States called the ACIP schedule. And the schedule is mandatory because the children need that to attend school. Virtually every school has a vaccine requirement. Some states, there's no way to get out of it. California, New York, Connecticut, and I believe Maine. Recently, West Virginia Aaron Siri announced that they're going to start to have exemptions. Now, a place like Texas, we got 30 million people. We're as big as Australia. We have philosophical, religious, and medical exemptions. And do you know, for this routine vaccine schedule, which now includes COVID vaccines, about 2.5% of people over time every year, the kids, don't take any vaccines. 2.5%. The Quakers, the Amish, other sects, they don't take vaccines. They're perfectly fine, by the way. There's no outbreaks of measles or polio or any of these legacy diseases. Now that number's up to 10% with the COVID-19. People are saying, when I visited Kyle Kingsbury yesterday, his kids were all running around the house. None of them had taken a single vaccine, and they're perfectly healthy. So we don't know the intent, quote, the intent of the vaccine program, but we know the effect. It cannot be healthy for children to take messenger RNA vaccines. There have been hundreds of children who have died directly due to the vaccine, autopsy confirmed vaccine deaths. And we can't possibly understand what this is going to do to human health over time. But Chris, it cannot be good. There hasn't been a single good report on these vaccines.
No, absolutely. What's your opinion on people taking the flu vaccines? Are these now a combination of COVID and flu vaccine, or is now the flu vaccine now an mRNA? Where are they going with this? And is this something that's still being pushed?
There's not yet a combination product, although our government agencies by the way, our government agencies advertise vaccines for the manufacturers. That should never happen.
No.
Our CDC is advertising for Pfizer or for Moderna or GSK, for instance. We need to stop this. The government cannot advertise for the companies. But so COVID, RSV, and influenza are kind of co-promoted to go in and take them all at once. There's no combination products, but I want people to understand that Pfizer and Moderna, the boosters, were just tested on animals. They're not fully FDA licensed. They are emergency use authorized, even though there's no emergency. You just can tell the whole system is corrupt. Respiratory syncytial virus is an antigen-based vaccine if it's the Pfizer or the GSK, but it's messenger RNA if it's Moderna. Okay, so there's another messenger RNA vaccine. Now, influenza, which you asked about, the human influenza vaccines, so-called quadrivalent vaccines, they're all basically killed vaccines, but very ineffective. So there's like 4 or 5 CDC networks right now. The 2023, 2024 data, way less than 50% effective on anything. Sometimes 24% effective. That meaning anything less than 50% calculated theoretical vaccine efficacy is not even worth using. Because the protection is essentially negligible. Some studies it's statistically insignificant from 0. So if you have any side effect at all, you've just wasted. You're just put yourself at risk for no benefit. And so what are we seeing? There are skyrocketing cases over the decades, and most of them are with influenza vaccine, of Guillain-Barré syndrome, Chris. This is ascending paralysis. People end up on ventilators. Happened to a colleague of my brother's after a flu shot. This is a disaster. I used to take flu shots every year to be on medical staff. In fact, I took 40 flu shots. But now I've seen the data emerge on Guillain-Barré syndrome. I told myself, wow, I took a risk. I'll never take another flu shot again. Now, maybe an oxygen-dependent patient with emphysema who's on their last leg, an influenza infection could take them down. Maybe they ought to be offered this modicum of risk reduction with the flu shot. But boy, the risk of respiratory death would have to be really high to ever take one of these.
Yeah. Speaking of Moderna, is there any further information coming forward in regards to Moderna covering up heart attacks in toddlers during its trials of the boosters?
I'm unfamiliar with that storyline, but Daniel O'Connor at Trial Site News, I think everybody should subscribe to Trial Site News. He's covering it. Moderna's stock is taking a pummeling. They are in deep trouble. Investors are probably going to continued to shed their shares of Moderna. Their Epstein-Barr virus messenger RNA program was halted because of myocarditis. They've had myocarditis and other messenger RNA lines. I think the whole messenger RNA platform is going to be flawed. It looks like it targets the heart, and whether it's a form of cancer therapy or if it's a vaccine or metabolic replacement therapy, it looks like it's going to have cardiotoxicity. This paper by Schreckenberg and colleagues showed you sprinkle messenger RNA on cardiomyocytes, within an hour or two, the cells become toxic. They are dysfunctional. They don't conduct electricity correctly. They don't contract. Messenger RNA is toxic to the human heart. I would never take one of these myself, and I don't recommend them for patients.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, for the events of the past 5 years to have happened, it would have taken an enormous cover-up by doctors giving out these safe and effective medicines. Does it still shock you how grand of a scale this was? And do you think that the eventual consequences would be for the doctors involved in this conspiracy to probably face some kind of tribunal or accountability for what they've done? Because it seems like a very sick world where the financial incentive of your healthcare provider is more important to them than the very health of their patients.
Well, the financial incentives to doctors and healthcare systems played a big role, but I think bigger was the fact that doctors all took the shots. So the doctors were quickly philosophically and religiously involved in what we call vaccine ideology. They bought into this themselves. They took the personal risk. They had their families and their kids vaccinated, and they can't psychologically come to this new reality that they made a mistake. They may have made a mistake of all time with their personal health and their family's health. Do you know not a single chief of medicine anywhere in the world, Mayo Clinic, Harvard, Karolinska, Charity in Berlin, nowhere has anybody come out and expressed any concerns over safety of the vaccines? And here we are, we're in our 5th year of this vaccine debacle now. Can you imagine this? I think what's going to happen is I think these vaccines won't come off the market. This is like smoking now. Smoking, from the time the alarm was signaled that smoking was dangerous and caused lung cancer, doctors were smoking. They were advertising cigarettes. Nurses were smoking. No, smoking could not. Doctors were vehemently telling people that smoking was safe. It took 20 years from 1949, 1964 to the U.S. Surgeon General report. Then it took another 30 years to the Great Tobacco Settlement. There's going to have to be a significant die-off and a whole new generation to come in. The key question to ask your doctor is, Chris, are you unvaccinated? Let me tell you what, unvaccinated doctors are at a premium.
Yeah.
Because people know, the public knows, the vaccinated doctors can't tell the truth.
Yeah, absolutely. And speaking of tobacco as well, I'm seeing a resurgence. I saw Tucker Carlson the other day, and he had these little tobacco pouches, and people are putting them in their mouths. Now, I'm old enough to remember going back to the 80s. Back in England, we had something called Skull Bandits, which were these little tobacco pouches that people put in the mouth. And they seem to be pulled from the market, even though they did have a big warning on them saying that it could cause mouth cancer. These things were eventually pulled from the market. I understand that the celebrities and all these people are using these tobacco pouches as a protocol against other things, but is the risk far greatly outweighing the ability of them to do certain healing? And are people unaware of what past history has done with these things?
Well, nicotine is an addictive substance. It's related to caffeine, by the way, in my coffee. They're methyl xanthines. Now, it turns out nicotine, in one very good paper, and then in my clinical experience for sure, nicotine seems to block the SARS-CoV-2 spike protein, the spine on the surface of the virus, and its interface with acetylcholine receptors. So people who take a little nicotine, they feel better. In fact, the observation is smokers did much better through the pandemic than non-smokers. I've never seen a smoker myself with long COVID syndrome or a vaccine complication, ever. I mean, this is an amazing observation. I've never seen it. Current point prevalence of smoking in the United States is 17%. So this observation that nicotine could have a salutary effect did take off. And so over the last 2 years, we've used a nicotine patch, which is a safe way to give nicotine, 7 milligrams over 24 hours. Nicotine gum, another way to do it, that's a 2 milligram dosing. But these pouches that you mentioned, in fact, Kyle Kingsbury, I was on his podcast yesterday. During the podcast, he kept changing out these pouches. He was doing it himself. The pouches lay the tobacco directly against the oral mucosa, and it causes a big white patch in there called oral leukoplakia. And when I was a kid growing up in Texas, we used to call it dip snuffing with Skoal and the other chewless tobacco. It was very common. And all these kids had big white spots on the inside of their oral mucosa. They actually used to compare how big they are. And those are precancerous lesions. So yes, I think people are running the risk with the oral tobacco of causing cancer. I think the nicotine is a great idea. 7 milligram nicotine patch, very safe. It's available over the counter, by the way. That would be Habitrol Step 3, 7 milligrams on Amazon. So you don't need a doctor for this. But as we come to the end here, what I'm finding is that for long COVID and vaccine injury syndromes, these general brain fog, loss of mental clarity, post-exertional malaise, feeling generally unwell, this can be managed by people themselves. They don't need doctors for this. Yeah. So I think first and foremost, they need a way to get rid of the spike protein from the body, and that's McCullough Protocol base spike protein detoxification. It's copyrighted my name because I'm the person who first published this. Wellness Company has Ultimate Spike Detox. That is far and away the lead product now, higher doses, far more effective. So Wellness Company, Ultimate Spike Detox. At Wellness Company, Dr. Drew helped us with this. A product called Mind Lift. Mind Lift helps clear this brain fog. Post-exertional malaise, we have elevated energy. It features picoline. And then the last one is heart health, which features L-carnitine, selenium, beetroot extract, and other things. And so I helped design that one. So we have 4 products, and then you can get over-the-counter nicotine. You could add in N-acetylcysteine, methylene blue, echinacea. There's a whole variety of other things. But if you go to Wellness Company, go to twc.health/courage. That'll get you into the system. Most people get memberships. That's what my wife and I did because we get free supplements. Because we use enough of them, it's worth it. Just you use, once you get in the system, you can just get the supplements for free. Chris, people need to take steps now because I think we've all had COVID or the vaccine or both. This spike protein is in our bodies and it's dragging down the immune system. It may be making us prone to blood clots. It may be actually even cancer promoting and other things. We got to get it out of our bodies.
Yeah, definitely. Well, Peter, this has been, again, an absolutely incredible interview. I really appreciate the knowledge and everything that you bring forward. As you say, people need to start preparing, getting their cabinets into more natural health remedies and having that on hand. Look forward to speaking to you again. Look forward to receiving your emails today and tomorrow and looking at your work. If people want to follow you and catch up with more information on what you're doing, where's the best place for them to go?
Central source is petermcculloughmd.com. That'll take you everywhere. Get Courageous Discourse Substack. Sign up. Free email every day, like Chris says. You'll get updated on the graphical abstracts, key interviews, breaking news. We've got 3 writers on this every day. It's probably the leading medical news service that you can possibly get. Tune into my show Saturday, Sunday, 2 p.m. Eastern, McCullough Report on America Out Loud News, and then Pulse, myself and Malcolm on Wednesday at 5 p.m. Eastern. It's on the Apple iHeart Podcast Network. That's in audio. Make sure you support McCullough Foundation, McCulloughFND.org. We're so active in our scholarship, media, in the courts, and in public policy. Your McCullough Foundation has been a major counterbalancing force out there against the government false narrative. And we need it because we just keep getting more and more, and there doesn't appear to be any assurances. We get new presidents, new premiers, what have you. It's the same story right now. And so what I've done and what you've done is we've encouraged people to seek the truth, do their own research, rely on independent media, and to be self-reliant. I don't think we're going to be saved by anybody, Chris. We have to save ourselves from the current madness spreading around the world. I'm Dr. Peter McCullough. Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you very much, Peter. We'll talk soon. You take care, sir.
Thank you.